Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective, where today we are going to be doing something kind of inspired by this past episode of Season 15, where a lot of people felt like all 6 queens left in the competition all did a really good job in the challenge on the runway, and that no one really deserved to go home. We still saw Selena Estades go home, but a lot of people were calling for this episode to be a top 2, and I fully agreed. So we're going to talk about some other challenges throughout Drag Race's history that could have been non-eliminations, whether that be a top 2, whether that be no one's going to be in the bottom, whatever the circumstances. We're just going to talk about challenges where nobody really flopped. Now, this is kind of a broad thing because, there's not a ton of challenges where, every queen did a fantastic job, like we saw in this last episode, but there's plenty of episodes where nobody really stood out as being terrible. I wouldn't say anybody did a bad job. Maybe there were some queens who were forgettable or kind of went into the background, but overall, there was no glaring performances that were like, oof, that's a bottom-worthy performance. Now, if you think I am forgetting any, make sure you comment them down below. I think I have a good list going, so let's get into it, But first, I want to talk about today's video sponsor, Casetify. Casetify is the world's most popular tech accessory brand. They're best known for their protective phone cases. Now, I've known about them for a while because my sister is obsessed with Casetify. She is a Casetify stan, and when she found out I was doing the sponsorship, she was very excited. Their new EcoShock line of phone cases have over 20% increased protection for your device. And as a very clumsy person who's had their fair share of shattered phone screens throughout the years, this is the kind of protection that I'm looking for in my phone case. They also have their Impact series of cases, which can survive a 11.5-foot drop, but it still looks sleek and thin. Okay, I have to admit that was scary. But my favorite thing about Casetify is that they use 65% recycled and plant-based materials in their products. And through their sustainability program, they have collected and recycled over 51,000 used phone cases. So you can go to casetify.com/drag to get 15% off your Casetify order. So thank you so much to Casetify for sponsoring today's video. Okay, the first challenge we are going to talk about is the Girl Groups Challenge from All Stars 1. So this is a very kind of weird challenge because it's mixing up the makeover with the performance challenges. So our teams, because we are in teams, are each given a celebrity's daughter, and they have to then make them over and make them into a part of their girl group trio. So they're all doing RuPaul's songs, they have to do performances on the main stage, and as we see, they all did really good jobs. Was there a technical issue here, or could they have done better in this area here? Sure, but looking at all 3 groups, they made their makeover partners look as good as they could. I mean, in Raven and Jujubee's case, the daughter that they had did not want to be put into drag makeup. She wanted something more toned down, which is girl, read the room. Based on all of the factors that were given to them, I think all of the queens in this challenge did a good job. And if they wanted to make this a non-elimination thing, I think they definitely could have. If they knew they were going to do a top 4 anyway, just say, well, honestly, everyone did good, so maybe you all can lip sync for some money or something. Not that they were giving out money back then, but, lip sync for a win, and then we'll just go into the next challenge with 3 teams, and, that would work just fine. But instead, we see Yada and Alexis get kind of sacrificed here so that Chad and Chanel can move on to the final episodes of the season. And, I think for all of the early seasons, they're just edited a lot differently. The queens weren't necessarily going in knowing exactly what they have to know how to do like they do now. And I think that's why we have so many more now than in those early seasons. Is because these girls were kind of just getting thrown into the ring without necessarily having the knowledge of what would be asked of them. Not like we have now, where they know every challenge going in. They can do things to prep for all of the challenges that they can expect. So as we move on, we're going to get a lot more from the more recent seasons, but this is an early season example that I think really stood out. Up next, we have the DESPY Awards. So I just talked about this in, my season 7 videos that I just put out. I think that the bottom 2, that they choose for this episode makes sense, Kasha Davis and Candy Ho. But I don't think either queen really, like, did a bad job. It was more that they just didn't stand out as much as some of the other queens did. So this challenge is basically an award show where they are accepting awards and, you know, naming nominations, and they have to be comedic in their presentation. We see that this is kind of like an unexpected challenge for some of these queens to be doing well at, especially some of these, like, not comedy queens like Max and Pearl and Fame, who all do an amazing job in this episode. And then obviously you have queens like Jaden Dior Fierce and Kennedy Davenport and Katya and Ginger Minj, who are just, like, naturally charismatic and funny and also do a good job. But the bottom three is Violet, Mrs. Kasha Davis, and Candy Ho. Candy Ho doesn't do bad. She just doesn't have as many, like, funny moments. She just doesn't have as much natural charisma on stage as Ginger Minj, who's, you know, sitting next to her doing quip after quip after quip. So of course Candy's going to kind of fall back into the shadow a little bit. And then obviously Kasha Davis has her iconic welcome moment. And I don't think her set is all that funny, but I don't think there's much that makes it, like, terrible. Like, I don't think that she did a bad job. I think that if there were more flops in this episode, she definitely would have been safe. And same with Violet. You know, I think that Violet has some good moments, she has some moments, and overall it just kind of averages out to average. So again, I don't think anyone does a terrible job in this episode. And if they wanted to, they could have been like, top 2 lip sync, no one goes home. But for, you know, these older seasons, they weren't pulling these kind of stunts like they do now. You know, this isn't UK3 where they're just pulling out, like, every single thing that they have in their back pocket, like double win, 2 people go home, top 2 lip sync, you know, all of that, you know, craziness. But I also want to talk about another episode from season 7, the Prancing Queens. This is the challenge that's kind of like a spoof of Dancing with the Stars. And the queens get put into pairs. They have to do a lot. They have to make some gender-bent looks where half of their face is female, half of their face is male, and make the, like, dress/tuxedo that goes along with that. But then they also have to learn these mashup dances. So there's, like, the country robot, there's, like, the twerking tango, and you know, funny things like that. And I don't think anyone does bad in this episode either. Like, do I agree that Trixie and Ginger were the weakest? Yeah. But were they weak? No. I think everyone knew their moves. Everyone made some really fun looks. They took that half male, half female, Milk's Impact thing to, like, where it needed to go. I think that they all really embraced this challenge. They all did a really good job. At the end of the day, did someone have to go home? Yes, and we saw Trixie go home. But I don't think there was anyone that, like, stood out as bad. We're going to move on to season 8, where we have one of the first episodes of the season. And, you know, that's kind of unusual for this list here because usually there's always, like, those couple girls in the beginning that just, you know, need to go home. And then the cast is like, okay, these are all superstars. Like, these are all, like, great competitors. But on season 8, episode 2, Bitch Perfect, I don't think anyone really did bad. It's a Rusical where they're lip syncing and, you know, there's not crazy dance moves or anything unless you're Chi Chi DeVayne. Even the bottom 2, who were Dax and Layla McQueen, they definitely faded into the background, and that's why they were in the bottom 2, but I don't think that they did terrible. I think Dax maybe missed a line here or there, but, like, overall, they didn't do horrible. It wasn't like, oof, those performances were bad and they're gonna flop and go in the bottom and go home. It was more just like, yeah, they didn't stand out as much, or like maybe there's a moment that was just a little off. But overall, it was a really good performance. Even Kimchi, who was low and was very, I mean, this episode is about how she's a terrible dancer and how is she gonna do this challenge. And she kind of makes it work by portraying a character that can't dance. And so it's like, oh, yeah, I get her character. I get what she's going for. And, you know, can I tell that she can't dance and she's kind of using this as a crutch? Maybe. But it works. So, again, I don't think that there was anyone that was terrible. We're going to move on to All-Stars 2, where we have another Rusical. This time it is the Herstory of the World, where the queens are all portraying, like, famous, iconic women throughout history. And this definitely, I think, could have been an episode where nobody goes home. Because is Katya the clear worst? Yes. Did Katya also have the worst, like, dialogue and song to work with? Yes. So it's kind of expected, because, I mean, her Princess Diana part was just not funny. It wasn't, you know, as bombastic as some of these other performances. But besides Katya, everybody else gave, like, a 10. Like, they were going for the win. Even Ginger Minj, who ends up going home because of her runway, has a really, really fun performance. You know, she's like, I don't know, Catherine the Great or something, but whoever it was, she wanted to fuck a horse. But even queens who weren't in the top, like Roxy and Fifi O'Hara, were really, really, really good. I know I said Katya was the worst. Alaska was actually the worst here. But even Alaska wasn't bad. You know, she was playing this like Britney Spears Eve, and she did kind of mess up some lyrics and, you know, whatever, but it still was a fine performance. It wasn't bad. This really just felt like the first challenge on this list where like everybody is firing on all cylinders, and like they're all giving it everything that they have, and it, because of that, turns into one of the most iconic challenges we've ever seen, and I think is one of the reasons why we have Rusicals now every year. Season 9, I wanted to talk about the top 4 challenge, which was category is. Up until, you know, this season, there had been a top 3. Now, this challenge at the top 4, I kind of think is part of the reason why we get our first ever top 4, because they are all doing so well. We have Peppermint, who is, you know, just a great singer, a great songstress, a great performer, and she's doing all of that. We have Sasha, who's giving it her kind of weird edge. We have Trinity, who I know people don't like this verse. I don't give an absolute shit. I love this verse. I think she looks amazing in this performance. I think she's giving exactly what Trinity Taylor at this point would be giving in a Rumix challenge. And then you have Shea Coulee, who I think gives, even to this day, the best verse we have ever had on Drag Race. So I think all 4 of them did such a good job that was one of the catalysts for why they made it a top 4. Because we know that they filmed Peppermint going home. And I think that probably would have been, on like an earlier season, what happened. But because this challenge was so good, because they had the idea for the lip sync for the crown, they could justify having their first ever top 4 on a main season. This is still one of the best Rumix songs ever, and it's because all 4 of them are delivering personality. They're delivering what they do best in their drag, and it's distinct, and I mean, to this day, I could recite all of those verses, like, verbatim. Okay, now let's talk about All Stars 3, specifically the variety show. Now, we've had a lot of really terrible performances on the variety shows, and this is the one where, like, none of them are bad. Like, literally not a single one of them is bad. We have iconic performances like Aja jumping off the box, and Ben de la Creme with her, like, nipple tassel burlesque number. And then we have amazing musical performances like Trixie on the harpsichord? I think that's what it's called. We have Thorgy Thor, you know, doing her violin. Really fun dance performances like Kennedy Davenport and Bibi Zahara Benet. And I think that the, you know, bottom 3 was clearly Milk, Chi Chi, and Morgan McMichaels. But Chi Chi, from what we saw now, I think there is tea that she dropped her baton in the first take. But from what we saw, it wasn't bad. It was a little clunky. It was a little like, okay. But she still was doing amazing baton twirling stuff and, you know, tricks and stuff. And the issues were more with her appearance than the performance itself. And then for Morgan McMichaels, she does a really good job as well. Does she look over to the girls instead of trying to, you know, play to the audience in front of her? Yes. But that's really kind of a minute detail at the end of the day, and was pointed out because everyone else was giving flawless, spectacular performances. And even Milk, I mean, you know me, I'm a Milk apologist. I liked this performance. I think it was funny. Was it the most, like, insane, innovative thing on planet Earth? No. But for Milk, I really liked it. I think it was fun. It was camp. And you could tell that the audience and the judges were enjoying it as well. So really, nobody does bad in this episode. And especially for the first episode of an All-Stars, it really made the competition feel fierce and like anybody could be taking this thing. And, you know, cut to the Spice Girls episode of the season, you know, where they're making the girl groups and they're all like different Spice Girls. And it's the eliminated queens versus the queens who are still in the competition. Everyone does a good job here, too. Were there performances that were less than some of the others? Sure. Chi-Chi looked suspicious. Morgan was fine. Shangela was fine. But then you have iconic performances like Trixie Mattel and Ben and BB. And then on the other side, Thorgy and Milk and Aja. Like, there were so many queens who were doing so well. And this is just one of my favorite challenges, one of my favorite episodes. I wish we would have gotten the eliminated girls winning, as they should have, and then sending home one of the girls still in the competition with like a top 2 lip sync, and then whoever wins that lip sync comes up. It would have been iconic, but that's not what happened. So now we're going to talk about the season that I think has the most episodes like this. My favorite Drag Race season ever, except for All-Star 6. So my favorite regular season of Drag Race, season 12. Season 12, the girls were girling. Like, they were doing the top level of drag. They all wanted to be there. They all wanted to win. The competition was fierce. And it was just such a good season because it felt so close. It would have felt closer if Gigi Good didn't get safe so many times to get as many wins. We're not getting into that. The first one we're going to talk about is I'm That Bitch. I mean, you can't critique any of those girls. They all did so well, so fun. The smallest little minute detail, like Nikki Doll, like you seemed a little bit nervous, and it's like, okay, but she still delivered. She still looked amazing. Her verse was great. All of these verses are ingrained in my head, probably until I die. You know, my final words are going to be, N-I-C-K-Y's in town. Like, my mother, obsessed with this song. Whenever we're on, like, a road trip somewhere, like a family vacation, I put it on, and she's like, oof, that's my jam. I mean, this is one of the best episodes. It's one of the best challenges of all time on Drag Race, so it's just, top tier. And then we see them all deliver again in Gay's Anatomy, where, you know, our bottom 2 of Nikki Doll and Heidi in Closet, Heidi was in the bottom because of her runway, and Nikki was in the bottom because it was kind of her time. Like, Nikki did a fine job in the challenge, and if anybody, like, truly flopped, Heidi or Nikki both could have been saved. I really think this should have been a top 2 episode, especially early on in the season like it was. That would have really made things feel close. Like, if RuPaul said, listen, we are not going to pick a bottom 2 in this episode because you all did so well, especially in an acting challenge where usually there are like flops, you know, left and right. Now, we won't be doing this anymore, but top 2. Like, that would have really been a fierce moment for the season. But unfortunately, you know, Nikki Doll goes home. But I mean, that's still the only acting challenge I think I would ever like choose to put on. Like, I would ever like forcibly, you know, sit through. You know, just a couple episodes later, we have my favorite Rusical, and it's close now because we've had a couple, and we're going to talk about a couple more in this video, but the Madonna Rusical. Maybe it's just because I am a huge Madonna fan, where, you know, I can see, oh, they were pulling from this song for this, or they were pulling from this era for, like, there were so many Easter eggs from the Madonna fans. Everyone was doing exactly what they needed to, except for Heidi, who was given the weirdest choreo ever. That was not Madonna whatsoever, which then led to her being in the bottom, even though they gave her that choreo. And then you look at the other bottom 2, Britta Filter, who I think did a good job. I think that, you know, she had a really campy performance. She looked great. And I think that she was just in the bottom because she was the next bitch who, you know, had their name signed in the book of, like, you're going home. I think this for sure also could have been a top 2 where no one goes home. I mean, all across the board, amazing performances. And then a couple episodes later, we have the Vegas, you know, Rusical, where our top 5 does a bunch of songs from the Vegas review show. And they all do a good job. Now, should the problematic one have been in the bottom and gone home here? Yes, but that's not what happened. And instead, they had to pick the bottom based on track record because there was just so many great performances. Nobody did a bad job, and especially for how, like, grandiose the challenge was, like how much it asked from the girls, they all delivered. So that's 4 episodes of season 12 where I don't think there was a single flop performance. That's insane. And it just proves to me that season 12 is the best, that the competition was the closest, that the girls were performing at a level that was, like, so far above what we are used to, where, like, you know, every episode of this show, almost, you know, besides the ones we're talking about here, we have to sit through, like, oh, this queen sucks. Like, oh, look how bad she's doing in this challenge. Like, oof. And then the confessionals where, like, you know, they're saying, oh, she's gonna go home, girl, like, gonna be in the bottom. So for season 12 to have so many where it's just, there's none of that. It's just, wow, everyone's doing a good job. Wow, we're all having fun. Wow, we're all getting along because we have to cut the main, you know, fight of the season. It's so good. But now we're gonna cut to, I think, the other season that has a lot. All-Star 6, my favorite All-Star season. So we start out with the halftime show, which is my favorite, like, performance. Yeah, I think they consider this a Rusical. I don't necessarily think it's a Rusical, but it's one of my favorite performance challenges of all time because it is so fun. We get so many different, styles of performance, from like Carol Channing and Steven Tyler to a more like bombastic one like the Katy Perrys and the Lady Gagas and the Beyoncés. I mean, this should have been a top 2, and everybody agrees on that Jan and Trinity both did such a good job. Like, so good. Top tier. And I think that Jan ends up winning because her runway was better than Trinity's. But, I mean, I think they both 1000% deserved the win here. And they should have just been like, listen, let's just go to the old All-Stars rules where we're like, we'll pick a bottom 2, you 2 lip sync, and then, like, sorry, lip sync assassin, you have to wait. And, looking at our bottom 2, Akira Chanel Davenport, who, had no reason being in that bottom 2. I think she did an amazing job. And Yara Sofia, who was not giving face during her Shakira performance, but the dancing was all there. The performance was all there. It was just missing this, which I'm sure some of you are wishing that I was doing right now. But I don't think it was like a flop. It's just when everyone is performing at such a high level, those little details stand out. Same with Ginger Minj and Eureka, who I think just didn't get the essence of the divas that they were portraying, Madonna and Fergie. But was either performance bad? No, it just wasn't necessarily the best. All-Star 6 is so good. Okay, let's talk about the Drag TOTS challenge on All-Star 6. I like that they're doing more of these design challenges where they're not just like coming out in a garment. They have to make a character. And I think this was so good. They all have to make a children's character based off of the show Drag Tots that I don't think is around anymore. They have to make these kind of like fairy tale whimsical looks and then come up with a character that like surrounds that look and then do a monologue like as that character while they walk the runway. So there's a lot of aspects that go into this. It's not just making a look. And I think everyone did a good job. This is one where we have if you're not in the top, you're in the bottom. And I think that also sucks because Trinity gets robbed of like a top 2 spot. I mean, was Raja the best? I think so. But Trinity was very clearly the second best. And, it's so good. Kylie does this really fun witch look. And even though she had these bigger ideas for it, she was going to do a reveal and it just didn't work. It still, I think, was fun. Ginger Minj looked like Ginger Minj, but it was good. And then Eureka does this like evil queen look, which it doesn't maybe stack up to the rest, but it's still a really good look, and she does a fun performance of it as, she walks the runway. So, I mean, this was so good. And then literally, the next competitive episode later, because we have the lip sync Lollapalooza in between, is the monologues, where, I mean, this top 5 is just so good. They have to do a like stand-up monologue performance, and Ginger is definitely the weakest because the story that she's telling is very clearly made up, but she's trying to portray it as like it's real, and it's just kind of like, okay. But like Trinity does a great job. Kylie does a great job. Eureka wins the challenge and does a great job. Like Raja has, some awkward moments, but overall is still very good. And that just proves that like this season, the level of drag is so high. The runways are so good. The challenges are so good. And I loved the Lip Sync Assassin twist on the season, but I do think it also would have been a good season to have that top 2, like we saw in other All-Star seasons prior, because so many queens were performing at like the top level. Okay, season 14, we have another Rusical. We have the MOULIN Ru, where was Georges maybe not the best? Sure. Was Bosco maybe not as good as she could have been? Sure. But they were both good performances, and we saw amazing performances from Lady Camden, from Diabetti, from Deja Sky, from Willow Pill. I mean, this top 7 is truly like one of the best. Looking at every top 7 on like all the seasons, this is one of the strongest. This is just them in action doing the best that they can do, and it's so fun. This is one of the only Rusicals in recent years that I think holds up, that I actually listen to some of the songs. And also Leland is in it, and he is like my everything. He is one day going to be the father of my children, so impregnate me whenever you're ready, Leland. Okay, before I go to horny jail, let me move on to the other episode of season 14 that I wanted to talk about, which was the Daytona Wins challenge. Now this actually was a top 2 where nobody went home because it was so good. And this is kind of the template that I would put onto all of these episodes, where like just pick the top 2 and everyone else can be, high or safe. Because even the queens that were safe in this episode, Angeria, Deja, and Carrie Colby, they weren't bad. Was Deja and Angeria maybe a little bit forgettable? Yeah, but they weren't like cringy. It wasn't like, oof, these queens suck. Carrie Colby, I think, did a great job and could have been high in the top. They cared about her at all. So, I mean, this episode was it was so good that it literally spawned a sequel in season 15 randomly, and a sequel that I think is better, by the way. I mean, this is the blueprint, and it's the blueprint for a reason. Now, All-Star 7, I'm kind of being a little bit harsher on, because like technically we could talk about most of those episodes. Those are the best of the best. They were performing at such a high caliber, and there were plenty of episodes where I feel like everyone did a good job. I mean, there was very few episodes where anyone flopped. So I'm only going to talk about the ones where I think they all did like a really good job. And the first one is the Draguation speeches. Now, this is Raja's first win on the season. Jinx also wins. I think that most people agreed with that, but there were plenty of other queens who I think could have been given that top 2 spot, and I don't think people would have been like, oof. I think Jada does a really good job. I think Trinity does a really good job, and Vivian especially does a really good job. Like, everyone took the nature of what this challenge was asking it and brought it into a different direction, because all it is give a comedic speech about graduating. And, we have queens who took it a more emotional route, where they were talking about, like, their hardships in their life, like Shea Coulee, like Trinity the Tuck. But then you have queens who just went, like, full character, full camp, like Jinx and Raja and Vivian. So you're getting so many different flavors of what this challenge could be that it's just, like, oh, it's so good. And I remember finishing it and being like, I don't know who's going to win, because, like, there's justification for every single queen to win this challenge, except maybe Monet. But, like, it was so good, and I wish they would do more things like this in the future. And then the other challenge I wanted to talk about was another acting challenge, shockingly, the Santa School for Girls. Because was the script terrible? Yes. Was the things that they had to do in this script terrible? Yes. But they're all so charismatic and charming and fun, and they just dove right in and just went for it, that it ended up being enjoyable. Jada was the only one who I think didn't do a great job. She just kind of does a good job. But everyone else is firing on all cylinders. Jinx is giving it her all. Raja's having so much fun. Vivian, like, this is her element. And then, queens like Monet and Trinity are having so much fun with these kind of kooky, wacky roles that they're given. So this was one of the very, very few acting challenges that I ended up enjoying at the end. Like, being like, oh, that writing was horrible, but I still had fun because the queens were doing so well. And then lastly, let's talk about the episode that just occurred that made me want to make this video in the first place. Another Rusical, this time Wigloose, the Rusical. Now, I'm not going to get into, like, what should have happened necessarily, because, like, obviously I'm going to break this episode down, like, a lot when we get to the Riggery episode and, like, the unrigged episode. No one should have went home here. I mean, everyone did so well. And, was it the best Rusical? No. But I think with what they were given, they were just doing the damn thing. And I think it just shows how good this top 6 was on season 15. Where, this is like this is like a hard challenge. You have to lip sync, you have to learn choreo, you have to emote on your face. And I think they all did a really good job. The bottom 2 was literally just picked based off of either runway or who people, said should have gone home. Because there's not much you can do from the actual challenge itself to, like, base, like, oh, you should go home because of this, or you should lip sync because of this. So, top 2 lip sync. Just do a top 2, and then no one goes home, because it was so good. And it makes me so sad that, of course, my favorite of the season went home. Undeservingly so, but it's kind of poetic for her journey on the season, let's be real. Okay, so while I was editing, I was like, wait, there's more to talk about on season 15, because I actually think that both design challenges, I guess the first design challenge and then the ball, there was really no flops. Looking at, who struggled the most in the first design challenge, the bottom was Amethyst, Selena S. Titties, and Jax. I think Jax and Selena's looks are fine. Jax is being, like, great, actually, and Selena's being good. And Amethyst, while it's not good, like, it's clearly the worst, we have seen so many horrible travesties of looks in design challenges before that this really is not that bad. There's a couple issues, but overall, not that bad. So I don't think anyone really struggled super hard on, the final product on this one. And then looking at the ball looks, were some looks misses? Sure. Anitra's sugar ball look, Lucy's bag ball look, Malaysia's start your engines look, definitely Selena's money ball look. Yes, there were some bad looks, but overall, nobody had a terrible package, and nobody's final look was all that bad. Spice's was not good, but it wasn't terrible. Selena's wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible. So basically, I guess I just mean that, like, there were no golden boots in any of these design challenges on season 15. So I thought that these kind of also deserved a mention. So those were the episodes I really wanted to discuss. There were two more that I, wrote down. The Bra Wars, I think it's called, and the Beast Enders on UK. But they're both acting challenges that aren't the best, and I don't really feel like talking about more acting challenges. So both of these, I would say, do fit the bill, but we're just not going to dive in because there's just whatever. But let me know what you think. Did I miss any challenges that you think across the board the queens did a pretty good job, that there were no flops? I, tried to go through all the seasons, but I'm sure I missed at least one. And do you think there was one on this list that shouldn't be here? Was there a, as the kids like to say now, was there a sneak? How many sneaks? Comment how many sneaks are in this video. The way that I am turning 25 next month, and I truly feel ancient when people are commenting, "Ooh, Derek has a sneak," and I'm like, I have what? Like, what? The way that I can't even keep up anymore with the lingo just proves to me that I am on my way into the grave. I have 1 foot in the grave, and I have 1 foot in Drag Race Twitter, and neither of those are good. So, but let me know how many sneaks in the comments below. And as always, I would very much appreciate if you subscribed. We're getting closer to 60K, which is very exciting. Also, I gotta do that promo for the Rigged Recap, which is my official Drag Detective podcast, where we break down every episode of Season 15 and ask ourselves the question, is it rigged? We've had Jack Fed, we've had Press Conference, we've had Bootsy and Runner Eye and Black Boy and so many of my favorite content creators. And there are some very fun ones coming up as we get to the end of the season. I'm excited to have these last couple guests on. And comment below who you would want to see me ask on for All Stars 8 when we do the podcast for that. I hope we get another iconic episode next week of Season 15 like we got this week. I think it's the top rated episode of all time. So MTV, release the VH1 cut of the season and we won't have any problems. And I will catch you all on the next one.